You already have a note for like on call, right?
All right. Where John is.
He's stuck at the library. He'll be here in a second.
Okay. Let's go ahead and we're in session and turn it over to Jason. He can do his part.
All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. So we're trying to streamline this process as fast as we can for departments. So we're all here. Everyone will have questions for you if you want to just put forward some of your ideas, hit your highlights, and then we'll move through there and ask some questions and see what we can do. Introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you. For the record, Carrie Hong, Trial Court Administrator.
Ashley Brinkhurst, D6 Treatment.
Jason Dye, Deputy Child Court Administrator.
And if we could, we'd like to take up the D6 budget first and then allow Ashley to be excused and take up the other budget matters. So if you could go ahead and
86.
I'll just give a brief overview and then we'll turn some time over to Ashley to speak to the changes that we're requesting in this upcoming FY24 budget. First, let me just provide an overview of where we are in FY23. We're very happy to report to the Commission that our D6 projections is we're going to realize about nearly 1.2 million in revenue, actual deposited revenue in this against the 886,792 budget in FY23. So we're, in terms of D6's ability to bill and collect revenue, we're in a great place in FY23, and we anticipate being in a great place again in FY24. We continue to realize over 95% in revenue deposited against billings. Our actual figure is probably closer to around 2%, but we want to make sure we cover some fluctuation in it. The big changes that we're asking for in FY24, and I guess we'll keep it at a very high level, is one, we would, at the recommendation of Jason, we'd like to look at creating an enterprise fund for operations. Our conversation around an enterprise fund is that we would look at putting in the budget authority to allow D6 to add some positions, and then also to look at compensation for D6 employees, also creating some revenue to offset or some funds to offset any county incidental costs, whether that's through auditing, whether that's through legal, whether that's through HR, to make sure we're entirely dependent upon revenues received versus any county contribution or indirect or direct to the operations of D6. We've put in a placeholder of about $45,000 in the D6 budget to cover those administrative costs, but certainly we want to hear what traditionally is used in terms of enterprise fund for calculating those indirect
5%.
costs, about 5%. And is that based upon expenditure or actual expenditure, not on revenue? Okay. So we think that's a positive way for us to approach, and by having that additional budget authority as part of a enterprise fund, it allows D6 to meet its mission, which is really to serve persons who have behavioral health issues, keep them safely in the community, and offer some rehabilitation while they're in their court supervision. We are looking at some changes in compensation. These changes in compensation for the counselor senior and the counselor are really key to other similarly situated public sector employees. While Ashley right now has all of her positions filled, we continue to have competition and retention issues where we'd like to be able to fairly compensate these folks using the revenues that are generated from the positions. And we'd also like to add, through that enterprise fund, after we get earmarks based on revenue, we'd like to add positions. Right now, we have a couple weeks of waiting for folks to get an assessment and get in. Those are folks referred from the community, not necessarily our folks who are part of our treatment courts. And that's generally true with every treatment agency that we have here in Bannock County, really within the state, really within the nation. Wherever you're going, you're waitlisted to access behavioral health services. It's reflective of a statewide and national shortage in this. So we're looking to add folks to help us address this shortage using revenues that are generated from the positions, not dependent upon any funds. When we look at where D6 draws its revenue from, the vast majority of it is from Medicaid reimbursements and then also state reimbursements for services provided. So when we look at these positions, I think these really good county jobs that we've created, they're not dependent upon taxpayer funds. Most of it is coming from the federal government in terms of our reimbursements. It really reminds me of some of our conversations that we've had, like if we look at the DV court grant, I mean, we're looking at about $400,000 over 3 years of federal money with no county match coming in to support that. And I know when we can bring money into Bannock County, it's an asset to Bannock County. And I think D6, to the tune of this year, nearly 1.2, with a big chunk of that being federal money, is an asset to bringing revenue and supporting positions here in Bannock County to serve the entire district. Looking at compensation, looking at those new positions, and then moving us to enterprise fund, I think the primary things in D6. Ashley, did you want to speak to how things are going within D6 and your ideas about both compensation and those new positions within D6?
There's not much more to add than, you kind of hit everything. We're looking at wanting to add 2 counselor positions, we have about 30, we're sitting on about 30 referrals. That's pretty consistent. We brought in a counselor. We're finally staffed fully. That's been the first time, I think, in 3 years that we've had counselors fill every position, which is great. And we're still sitting on about 30 referrals from the community and trying to get assessments and intakes and all those things completed. We are also looking at wanting to add 2 case manager positions. That's one that Medicaid always encourages us to do, to be able to help our clients not just be able to get treatment, but also to be able to help them figure out any type of housing, filling out resume, employment, those types of things. And so that's been something throughout the county and the district that we would love to be able to provide for our clients that we have on that are already in our program and that are participating. So I don't know if there's anything more than just kind of why, what the purpose of those 2 new positions would be, is just to be able to give our clients the care in the community that we're looking for. And I think, like Carrie said, as far as across the board, I think even in our other providers, you're sitting at a wait list. I mean, you're 2 to 4 weeks out to be able to get services throughout the entire community. So,
another important thing is we look at FY24. These budget projections that we have for this year don't include an approximate 15% rate matrix increase that'll hit July 1. So when we look at even maintaining the level of service that we have right now with the existing rate matrix giving us $1.2 million in revenue against about a $900,000 budget, we're going to see a 15% increase that will impact next FY as well. So we think the revenue outlook and the ability to actually realize the funds to support that enterprise idea and add the expansion that we're talking about is we're just in a great position on the revenue side to continue to fully self-fund the operations of D6.
A couple quick questions. If you're going to have revenue increases, could you provide me with that? Clerk's office for doing revenue projections. Without that information, I wouldn't be able to give you accurate projections.
yeah, I think we've just been waiting on final numbers from Medicaid, so there are Medicaid increases and state increases. So we'll make sure we get those numbers to you as soon as we get final numbers on those. I think we were hoping to get those this week since they're supposed to be. They changed them again last week, so we're hoping to get final ones this week starting July 1.
Okay, even preliminary helps.
Okay.
So that we can start looking forward.
Okay.
As far as your salary increases, did you keep that on the Bannock County salary schedule, or are they just random numbers?
No, when we looked at them, I think we tried to find
The
closest matching grade
Okay.
to what we had in these state positions.
So you did keep it on the salary schedule? Okay,
Mhm.
perfect. Because even though you become an enterprise fund, you're still Bannock County. So the
Sure.
only thing that is going to change by becoming an enterprise fund is that you get charged the 5% admin fee and that you are truly self-sufficient, which you had been already. But all of the rules of the game are still the same,
Yeah.
just like how you were before.
Mhm. And I think we did, when we sat down and looked at it, we tried to match it to the Idaho Department of Corrections or the state to match what our positions are, which match the salary schedule for Bannock County.
Did you just tweak steps to get to those dollars, or?
No, I think
just
we
moved
looked for
up?
the closest grade
Grade.
that matched
Okay.
The approximate of where the minimum of the advertised clinician, which is the master's level, and the drug and alcohol rehabilitation specialist, which is the bachelor's level position. That lines up well with our senior counselor and our counselor.
Okay, perfect. And then when you were talking about your referrals, you're still just providing counseling services for the problem-solving courts, right? We're not.
Any court-connected client, so anybody
Okay.
that is through, yeah, we are not open up to
Okay,
any
perfect.
general, like, we don't take mental health or anything like that. It's all court-connected clients that are being referred from some, like, Idaho Department of Corrections or the court systems.
Okay,
So I
just
think
make sure we're not competing with private sector for counseling.
No.
If we look at and this was from the very beginning of day one, the target population of D6 treatment is persons under court supervision.
Perfect.
And so they're either in treatment court, they're on probation, they have an abuse or neglect case, a CPS case where they're working with health and welfare, and then also sometimes probation. They're on juvenile probation. So those are our 3 categories, or 4 categories: juvenile, probation, treatment court, and child. Did I say child protection already?
And no, we didn't say
Okay,
that,
child
child
protection.
protection.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because we're recording, so we want to
Yeah.
make sure that it's very clear that we're,
Yeah. And
Yes,
for the
we
folks
have
who,
not-
the
we have
folks who
not.
aren't in treatment court, they have choice. So if you're on probation and parole, you get a list of persons who take state funds or Medicaid funds, and they're choosing. If they're not under court supervision and they try and choose D6, we decline, because they're not in our target population.
perfect. That was all I had. I just like that.
You're still going out of the district, though? To
To
Teton?
Teton.
We do have just Teton. Yep, that's correct. And our number for that still stays the same. We actually really only serve, I think we have 2 juveniles, so they're not in a treatment court, but for the majority, I think 10 clients that we have from Teton are drug courts. So they're just the services for the drug court.
And just via Zoom and everything, just like always.
Yep, we don't go up there. Everything is through Zoom, so it's all just services that we're already providing.
And most of those were group sessions, right?
Yes.
So they're just joining into existing
Yep.
groups.
Mhm.
Yeah, seats on the bus.
Yeah.
We're driving the bus, we've got a few seats, let's put them on.
Okay, I don't have any further questions. Anyone else?
There wasn't anything else on B? That was A, right?
Well, yeah, I guess that's a.
Yeah, do you want to speak to,
I-
I think our
I
thing
went
on.
through.
As far as our B budget, being able to, I think that's just the increase of the B budget just comes along with adding employees. So looking at being able to provide, the technology and things like that for them. We'll have to figure out something with office space.
Yeah, I think our change in office space, our contract with Health Trust is an increase of 3% every year, so we build that into budget. And then we also estimated offices, asking for additional tenant improvements over at the city center campus to office the new positions. And so we would expect that they would want us to enter into a contract amendment to both do the tenant improvements, and then they would adjust the bill based on what they've been, I think our original one is like $15 a square foot, and then adjusted for the annual increases over time. So it's basically to figure out officing for the anticipated new positions if they're approved.
So if not all 4 positions are included, you could give us the dollar amounts that we could reduce the budget by.
Say it again?
If the new positions are not approved, then you would give us the numbers of what we could drop the budget back to.
Sure.
Yeah. I think
Because even though you have in here, we'll have to look at what projected revenue is to see if we agree with what you have. But just because you add a new employee, the health insurance costs are significantly more than what the contribution would be. Each new employee is a liability to the county of $125,000. And that's if it's just one individual adding to the insurance. So that's a big consideration with health insurance increases that we're looking at too.
All we would do is we would ask for the same consideration for these employees as Bannock County employees in terms of calculating that budget impact as all the other.
Right, and that's what we do.
Cool.
So,
Yep.
Yep.
okay.
And I think part of this too is when we look at it, one of the reasons why we're very interested in the enterprise fund. We understand, that 5% against actual expenditures, and we've appreciated work in the county and up to this point. But the reason why we think that's important, not only on the principle of making sure that we're fully self-funded and covering indirect costs, but to look at how we can serve the population that we want to serve. And so when we say what would be the budget that we're trying to target, and whether it's a budget that puts us at a maintenance budget that really looks at the 10 positions that are there, or what it would look like if it was 14, and then tracking the ability to generate the revenue, or actually having the actual revenue that would cover those positions and not create any additional liability for the county. So that's why we see the advantage of the enterprise fund, of why that 5% to offset county indirect costs is important to us, because we have folks who need to be served. And we think we've done a good job in serving them and keeping them in the community and helping them be rehabilitated.
Anything else?
Okay. Perfect. Can Ashley be excused?
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. And if you want any of our numbers too, Christy, I'll get the Medicaid numbers to you. I'll talk with Tracy and get that sent over to you within the next, hopefully, 2 days.
Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. 11:30?
I'll be able to get that by the end of the day. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. See ya.
Here, I'm going to slide over just so Jason doesn't feel lonely. So my computer still goes asleep. I was just telling Ashley, I don't know if this is, well, it's me. Historically, I could print these off and still read them. I can't do that anymore. And so I have to have them on my computer so I can zoom in on them. Let's take up, or do you have any preference where we go next, Jason?
Just district court is fine.
Okay, let's
Court
talk.
report doesn't really have an operating budget, and that's, I think that one was under you anyways, right?
For clerk of the district court, if you want to do that real quick, is that?
No, I
Oh,
think
just
that
district
one's-
court.
Yeah, just district court.
Okay. For district court, let me tab over to my Excel spreadsheet. So you'll see in district court, we didn't put in any specific changes in compensation. I had a chance to speak to Jason earlier. He explained that there was some initial thinking on changes to compensation and probably a countywide approach. There were just a couple things that I wanted to speak to there. I would call out the staff attorney positions. We've had a longstanding practice in Bannock County of indexing those staff attorney positions to the deputy prosecutor, deputy public defender compensation. So as the county looks at those attorney positions, we'd ask that those staff attorney positions be considered in the same way as those other credentialed positions. I'd also ask for some consideration regarding persons who have judicial assistant assignments that are not full-time. And so these are folks, and this goes back and forth between district court fund and clerk of the district court fund. We have some, Jason has some deputy clerks who aren't full-time judicial assistants but have regular court assignments. And I think that the best example of that is in juvenile court. So Jason has 3 deputies who are assigned over in juvenile court for Judge Call. Jessica Hickman, who's the lead out there. You got Tyler Allen. We've got, oh my gosh, what's our brand? Sharon is a new hire. Over there, because they're a smaller office, all 3 of them have regular in-court assignments. And so they're that hybrid between administrative assistant and judicial assistant. And we would encourage a look to try and compensate them somewhere to reflect those responsibilities. I know making those changes, this all has impact on the overall budget. And I threw out an idea. I don't know if it's something that the county can look towards in the future. There's a longstanding practice between the cities in Bannock County and the county for them to give us voluntary contract contributions to support the processing of those city cases. Because of change in statute, those have been being sunsetted over time, and this was the last year of sunsetting those. Historically, we were getting, it was a little over, I thought I printed out that email. We're getting over 100,000 in voluntary contributions from the cities to the county to offset the administrative costs of processing those city cases. Those were sunsetted, and the legislature replaced them with revenues from the liquor fund. Those revenues from the liquor fund have exceeded the city contributions, the voluntary contributions, even when they're at the highest level. If we're looking at whether it is to address compensation for those hybrid judicial assistant positions, or even looking at some steps for the administrative assistants, like a clerk 1, a clerk 2, or clerk 3, if we wanted to make those moves without adding additional cost against property tax, we do have some dedicated funds that are coming in from the liquor money that might be an offset to that. And I checked in with Christy, and we have seen there has been growth within the district court fund, I think mostly in personnel, just in the compensation adjustments the county's been making. And so those funds have always been used for their dedicated purpose. But if we wanted to earmark that growth in those other funds that are not property tax dependent, coming in to possibly look at compensation, whether it's this year or in the future, about earmarking some of the growth in that money to help make sure the deputy clerks who work for the courts, that we have options to make sure that we have some growth for them within those funds.
We do need to take into consideration, we have seen some declines in district court revenues where some of that growth has been absorbed.
Sure.
So.
And I know it's an overall picture and approach. I'm trying to be helpful by saying, hey, here's a positive revenue picture on one side, and we know it's dedicated to support growth in the courts, and maybe in the future as we look at opportunities. Because we got to keep, I would love for folks to continue to see working for the courts to be a deputy clerk as a career path. That it's not, I'm going to work a couple years and then punch out when I can find something better. We've had some amazing folks who come through the courts, and if we can offer them some room to grow, hopefully we can get some retention and keep them around, and really support the idea that working for Bannock County is a career that you can support your family on. So we talked about staff attorneys, we've talked about those judicial assistant hybrids, and also revenue coming in from the liquor funds. The only other call out I had in district court fund, I want to speak to the trial expense. We continue to have some cases of interest that we're watching closely. We'd like to ask that, even though we don't fully utilize those funds, knock on wood, we do have some cases out there that are watching closely. We have the Comper cold murder case that we're expecting to go to trial in October. We also have the Howard Funeral Home case that we're watching. We don't know exactly how that is going to move forward, but we appreciate the county's support in keeping some trial expense reserves, because we do have some large cases that are out there that we anticipate reaching disposition in this upcoming year. I think the only other item I have in there is just a call out, at least in our operational budget. We were looking at FY23 of $278,950. Our request for this year is $275,750, so we've done our best to keep that B budget flat, and really ask the commission for their support in looking at compensation for district court fund employees as can be done. We also have, you'll see we've carried forward, and this is part of our ongoing in capital, the $60,000. We should wrap up the remodel in 218 in this FY and actually get started in the remodel up in 320 upstairs, Judge Jarman's courtroom. So we'd ask to continue to have capital funds made available to finish our remodel efforts with those two new courtrooms. Or those, not new one new courtroom and one remodeled courtroom. And that's all I had in district court.
On the jury commission postage,
Yes, sir.
I mean, we could look at that. We don't really
Sure.
know. We could probably take that down even a little further, but
Yeah.
this is probably a safe bet for this year, and then we can address that next year a little bit more. But
That's 100% correct, Jason. So I checked in with Tori and asked her to say, hey, give me This is our first partial year on the new enterprise jury, which really reduced our postage there. My advice to her was to kind of take a very conservative approach this year, because we expect after running a full year, we'll have solid numbers to come in. But what enterprise jury basically does is all of our qualification and summons are being paid by the state right now. We're keeping a jury budget kind of because we were the second pilot county in the whole state, and Jason and Tori really drove the implementation that'll impact the rest of the counties. That is some space that we could possibly pull back on B budget, but we're still very new in that transition. But it's one to watch closely, because I think we'll have much less dependence upon county mailing out summonses and questionnaires to jurors in future years. And we did get the support of the legislature that the state will continue to pick up that cost through state FY24, and we have that built in as an ongoing expense in future state budgets.
I don't have anything else on that one. Christine, do you have anything else on that one? Okay.
I want to talk about treatment court next. This is kind of in our trusts.
So which,
That it would be, I think the only, in treatment court on the trust, I think the important ones at a high level is really looking at compensation for the two coordinators.
okay, so that's not in the trust, it's in the grants.
In the grants.
Your drug court.
Okay.
And we really
Talk
don't
about grants.
have, because those are treated like grants, we don't have pages for those, so just speak to
I can
them.
speak to it. So we have two full-time positions in Bannock County that support our treatment courts and support Wood Court. So Judge Gabiola and Katie Abahauser and Jared and probably Jimmy Gentry came and talked to you about Wood Court. So half of Katie's position is paid out of Wood Court. The other half is paid out of is paid out of grants, but it's state money that is allocated to the 6th Judicial District. That pays the other half of Katie, and then 100% of Misty. You'll note in those grants I've requested a salary adjustment for those two positions. We've recently, through partnership with Bear Lake, hired another full-time coordinator. So they're a Bear Lake County employee who's 100% state funded to coordinate Bear Lake County, Caribou County, and Franklin County. That position was hired indexed to what Bear Lake County was paying a judicial assistant down there. And we would just like to get Katie's compensation and Misty's compensation because they perform the same job function as a Bear Lake County employee in coordinating those courts. We'd like to match them up. And that's at I believe the request is right around $21.50 was the minimum of what we recruited at for Bear Lake County. And this change in compensation would be 100% supported through state funds allocated for coordination for our judicial district. So we would like to use that state money, and then I've already checked in with Jimmy Gentry with Department of Correction, the grant comes from them. So we would have the combination of Supreme Court money and IDOC money to get Katie comparable to the Bear Lake County position, and then we'll use all Supreme Court money to get Misty comparable to the Bear Lake County position.
What is their titles again?
So they're both treatment court coordinators. We have some legacy
So they're
titles.
probably grade
It's like
eights?
court services director is what the line item says, but that was back when we had Cindy
So
Hockley in
probably
that spot.
Grade eights? Most of our coordinators are eights? Because we still need to keep them on the county scale, regardless of, I mean, if they're a county employee.
We'd be looking at maybe a change in, I think it would probably drive a change in grade, because I think they're at 18 something an
Then
hour
that would
right
be a
now.
grade 8. So you're wanting to move them to closer to a grade 10?
Yeah,
So they're still county employees,
still county
Yes.
employees.
but being paid by the state. Okay.
Have you worked with Brian at all on those job descriptions?
On Ryan.
With Brian?
The job
Okay.
description doesn't change.
So you're just, okay.
Yeah,
But you
and
haven't worked with Ryan?
I have talked
see
to
if
Ryan
it's-
and shared with him that we have both statewide and then also within counties within the 6th district, that we have persons performing the same work at very different compensation.
Other than they live in Bannock County, not Bear Lake County.
Correct.
So the person in Bear Lake, Bear Lake County employee.
Bear Lake County employee, they report to Amy Bishop, who's the elected clerk down there. They're managed by the elected clerk, and then Jared Marchand, who's our district-wide treatment court manager. So they cover, in Bear Lake, they cover Franklin County, Caribou County, and Bear Lake County.
The only word of caution on that is, while that same position makes that much in Bear Lake, I'm sure there's other county employees that make different wages than what Bear Lake makes.
Sure. I'm just using that
So-
as a comparable.
Right.
But that'll be something that is considered by the board and
How it compares with people in Bannock County.
And then everything else on those grants, we're just looking at spending based upon the allocation that comes from the Supreme Court. A lot of that grant money is kind of quote-unquote pass-through other than those positions where Bannock County receives the allocation, and then we're cutting checks to distribute those funds to the other counties in the district. And then really in trusts, I think these are actual trusts, Christie. We have our court facilities trust. We're asking to continue to allocate funds in that court facility trust. By statute, court facilities is dedicated to construction and remodel for court facilities. We're asking for 41 in court facilities to help continue to support the remodels and building of the new courtrooms here in Bannock County. And then we're also asking for spending authority in the DV Court, Family Court Services Trust, of about $7,200 or $7,300. Basically, that's money that was paid in as restitution for offenders who received domestic violence assessments. We didn't have spending authority in there last year. We'd like to get spending authority to use that monies to support the work of the Bannock County DV Court. So what we're looking at is, in case we don't get the renewed DV grant that Kim Talbot has worked with the county on applying for, we would use those funds to help offset a small portion of the loss of federal money. So those monies would be used to make sure that DV offenders get a compliance evaluation. If that money is used to fund that, there would be a restitution order, and the money would come back into that fund, and we could just keep using it to cover those evaluations in the future. Didn't have spending authority in there last year, but made sure to ask for spending authority in this year.
Our trusts are a little different. Used to, our trusts ran on cash basis. Governmental accounting changed that, and then we have to budget for it, or you can't spend it. So that's why we're picking that back up.
And that's all I have.
I don't have any other questions. Do you?
No,
Anyone?
I don't.
Okay.
Good. Well,
Thanks
thanks
a
so
bunch.
much. We'll get that follow-up information to you, and then we're just waiting on the Supreme Court to approve the new state budget. And once we get those numbers, I'll send them out so we all can be tracking on how much we're going to be receiving from them for for our trusts and our grants. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
I did
Good job, Jason.
More support.
Well, no. One of these days, you guys are not going to have to listen to all my nonsense, but he'll be substituted for me.
I wasn't sure you even still worked here. Haven't seen you forever.
Well, I'll tell you, I took last week on vacation and spent a week in Sheridan, Wyoming, to visit my wife's in-laws. I've never been to that part of the world. Not some beautiful country over there. Glad to be back. See you.
See you later.
Steve will be here at the quarter till,
Okay.
as I anticipated you were.